Good afternoon and welcome to White Box Harlem. Today we will present the last chapter, Then and Now, Exodus 2 Conversation Series. Yep. The curators, Elizabeth Rogers and Anthony Haden-Guest, will interview a few of the participating artists. Shan Hong Tu, Yin Mei, Muna Tseng, on behalf of her brother Tseng Quanchi, Yan Li, Bi Li, Peng Li, and Bob Li from the Asian American Art Center. The conversation will center on their particular experience early in life and what motivated them to leave their country, be it mainland China, Hong Kong, or Taiwan, and select New York City as the final destination. As emigrant, emerging young artists, art students at the time, after the democracy wall fell down in Beijing. What is it that they found in New York that made a dent and, an implant into their way of working, their ideas, how they processed the rambunctious, frolicking New York of the East Village days, where there was no more isms to think of, and their visits to museums and galleries in Soho, uptown. And in exchange, how did they bequeath New York? What did they offer to New York? As this is a town, a metropolis since the 1940s, people have been emigrating to it. And in a time of darkness, where the political process is bent on really being anti-immigrant, we would like to ask them as well, how do they feel today? In a moment under this pandemic, COVID-19, there's a resurgence of xenophobic attitude towards Asian and Asian American people in particular. So all this will wrapped up, by Anthony Haden-Guest beginning to moderate. But before that, I would like to really thank very much people who have made this exhibition, workshops, and video conversations possible. The National Endowment for the Arts, New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, for the catalog, NYSCA, New York State Council in the Arts, our board of directors and advisors, the staff members, the internship, everybody who has collaborated for a good year and a half to make this Exodus to unhinging the Great Wall Chinese art revealed in the East Village in 1980s possible. And with further ado, I will pass the mic to Anthony Haden-Guest, please.
This began for me when Elizabeth introduced me to Bob Lee, and I told Bob that I'm an immigrant. I'm a British immigrant, but British, when we meet each other abroad, we tend to bristle and look at each other with extreme suspicion. And I love my country, and I go there quite often, but I don't seek them out abroad. I have no reason to. I'm living here. I'm fascinated by the cultural glue that exists in the Chinese community, and this for me has been a learning experience. And I think a lot of it's to do, well, you guys know, a lot of it's to do with language, a lot to do with shared cultural beliefs. And so for me, as I say, this has been a journey of discovery as much as an act of curation. Is Bob there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
I think that the glue that brought me to start to focus on Asian American artists, partly, of course, we part of it is Chinese, but largely it was being in America and having been born and raised in the United States and experiencing the 60s and all the assassinations and the whole sense that the country was going in the wrong direction, fighting in Vietnam, and having most of my background in academia in art history and ancient art history. And in fact, your statement about the early beginnings of civilization was very appropriate, because that's what I was looking at very extensively. And that's partly why I was into and wanted to do Asian American art, because our civilizations go back so far, and the fundamental principles are so different. So I wasn't interested at all in the marketplace, and largely it was the racism and the prejudice in the United States that brought me to focus on the issue of Asian American artists, which was then read by the mainstream in the media as an issue of identity politics. That's sort of how it came about. There is a great, I think, intimacy, or you might call it that, a great happiness or joy that I found in my family and my mother, and but and that I felt was lacking in all the um, friends, American friends, Jewish friends, um, not so much Black friends. I think Black friends were very joyful in for me, for my experience, but looking at that as as a as bringing a Pan-Asian sensibility to what the Art Center, Asian American Art Center, was about, to bring in that sense of joy in life. Um, but that was, we founded our organization in Chinatown, so it was seen mostly as a Chinese organization. So we had to work very hard to be seen by the Korean community, the other Japanese community, to show that we wanted our goal to be Pan-Asian, and we wanted to show as many women as men, um, and so I think that, given that in Soho there was maybe one or two other places that once in a while would show Asian American artists, we wanted to focus on that and have continued to focus on it all these years. Um, and so I think the question is, what is their place? What is their importance in the United States? And I believe that in bringing reinventing various Asian elements in their heritage, in their own beliefs, and what they find significant, what is still becoming a part of the new creation, reinvention of themselves in America, is a very key phenomena that is happening and will probably continue to happen for a couple hundred years. But because there's so much to bring the world together, that is extremely important.
Good.
So
Thank you.
that's what I felt in doing this, and in trying to continue to be valuable to focus on. Now I see that taking that apart and looking at the Chinese element, or looking at the Japanese element, or other curators today looking at various aspects like diaspora and other issues, particularly what's happening today with Trump, is that it has pushed us more to refocus on the Asian American aspect because of the racism that he has pushed into our face. So it's interesting to see that it comes back, and to see all the permutations, and to here in this case to look at the 80s as particularly from the Chinese angle is a new experience for me. To think of the 80s in that sense. We did the Chinese artists in one show in '91 after Tiananmen Square. But to look at it now and to see this show is something that we didn't do it back in those days.
Yeah, and we did, the White Box did the 25th anniversary of that exhibition in the Lower East Side.
The Tiananmen Square show, yes.
Right. Anyhow,
Bob,
we have a time cap, so I would like to continue the conversation. Anthony,
yes.
One of the points in their videos from Yin Mei and Hong Tu that I like very much is the reason why they emigrated. Both of them were idealistic with Mao's early doctrine, and then both of them were disappointed. Could you take it from there?
Yeah, I was talking with Hong Tu, and it interested me how many of the artists in Exodus, given particularly when they grew up in China, had dealt with the Cultural Revolution. Some, if they were not from mainland China, were anti from the beginning, but some Hong Tu and I think Yin Mei were early enthusiasts. And Hong Tu decided, he realized that Mao, in one line in Chinese tradition, wanted to turn himself into a god and changed his mind. And that is basically why a great many people came to America. And I'd like a few comments on that, please. Can somebody say, I'd love to hear from people why they chose to come to America. Hong Tu, maybe.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very good question, because sometimes maybe my generation, my same generation artists, they will consider, oh, that's an old story. Cultural Revolution is past more than a half of the century. Why don't you also talk about the Cultural Revolution? To me, people will forget, because especially for the last 30 years in China, the financial situation, material life changed a lot, which is true. But politically, ideology, nothing really changed. Something even worse. So as what I understand about history, if you don't try to recall what happened and give a new perspective to talk about the history will be repeat itself. So that's the situation that already happened in China. For example, Mao wants to make him as a god, as Anthony already mentioned about that. Yes, well, that's what happened in China. And he became like an emperor in China until his death. Even before his death, he never say anything about what about the future after his death. He just wants to stay the same position until his death. For the after Mao's death, something changed, like Deng Xiaoping's new policy makes economic situation change. That's true. But with new leader like Xi Jinping, he just changed the Chinese policy, I think less than 1 year ago, to make himself in the same position as a president forever. He said that there's no law for anybody only 4 years or 6 years in this position. So that's to me, the situation is even getting worse. For example, I said again and again, and not only me, many Chinese people, they don't like Mao's idea about we call the Mao code, like a Mao's personal worship. But even today, I mean, that this moment, Chairman Mao's portrait still hang on Tiananmen Gate, and the Chairman Mao's dead body still show to general public in Tiananmen Square, just even today. In this case, I think anyone, anytime to recall, to re-examine Cultural Revolution, to examine what happened for the last now half of the century in China by the ruling of the Communist Party, is necessary. It must be the must-to-do job. So that's why I never reject if people ask him my personal experience when I was in China. I think Immigrant also has a similar object to talk about, because we had a panel in Asian Society a few years ago with Immigrant together. I think Immigrant has more experience to tell.
It interests me that I know many Europeans, including British, who came here. I know of none who returned. Everybody came here as a decision. Many Chinese artists from Exodus have actually gone back, not full time, some partly. It remains a communist country, but in European terms, it's more like Tito's Yugoslavia than Stalin's Russia. I think it's become culturally fairly liberal and politically still very hard line. I think this has made things very different from what I see. Many Chinese artists now, some of the Exodus artists now have good careers in China also. I'd like to comment on that.
Okay, and I think this is also a very good question, because it's a very updated question. Yes, after 1989, in the middle, I think in the middle 90s, many artists back to China, from European, from American. Welcome here was in 1982. That's like a first group of Chinese people moved to this country. But now, the first group moved to this country, probably everybody already back to China. But the most interesting thing is, recently, for the last maybe 5 years, people started back to America from China. That's what I think maybe now, if you have a different attitude about your idea to be an artist, you can make different decisions. For example, I come here very simple because I couldn't continue my art in China, not because of the material life, physical, no, like economic life. I also okay. I had a very good job. I was an import and export company for jewelry design, and after 1981, many schools, not only one, not only two, many schools invited me to be a teacher in school. That's the best job for artists at that time. We didn't have a freelance option. I mean, before 1980, but I cannot do anything creative, and I cannot really explain my idea for my work. I had so many problems. So that's the reason I come to here. I even didn't make the final decision why I go to New York, not Paris, because the reason I leave China was to leave China, not to find anything specific places to go. I also say this, it's kind of like a cliche story, like the bird in the cage. If you open the cage of the bird cage, the bird just go out, fly out immediately. They're not going to make decision. Are going to east, are going to west, are going to up, going down. No, it just leave, open the door, go to the sky. That's what exactly I feel about China. But in the middle 90s, okay, the financial situation changed a lot, China. Many, not only Chinese financial situation changed, also many international gallery, museum, American museum, American gallery, even college, university, they made a branch in China. So that's really attract people go back to China. And so to me now, yes, I go back to China every year for never longer than 1 week to see my parents. That's the only reason I'll go back to China to see my parents. After my parents passed away, nothing attracted me to go back to China.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yin Mei,
Something
could
about,
you speak a little bit on the same subject, please?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would like to. Go ahead. You go ahead first.
Bing, then Bing. Yin Mei.
I go first. Okay. I grew up differently from Hong Tu. I grew up in Hong Kong, and however, I was born in China. And when my family moved out from China, I was a baby, so I know nothing about China. All I know Chinese and the Chinese culture is in Hong Kong. Recently, about 6 years ago, I did go back to China. I started a studio in Shanghai. The reason I do that is I try to understand what China is like. I try to pick up maybe perhaps what I missed. And just like I came to United States, I came to New York, and I not just say looking at the artwork. I want to understand the city. I want to understand the people. And the same thing that right now, back and forth from here, from New York to Shanghai, I try to understand the artists, local artists, Shanghai artists, Chinese artists, young artists, what do they think and how they, the work, what's the work? It's not just about the work and what's their life. And that is important to me for the understanding, not just about their art, it's about the life. And I just go back to what Bob Lee talked about, that I appreciate that Bob started the Asian American Art Center, bring all those Chinese American and Asian American together. And to me, Chinese American, Korean American, especially Asian American, yeah, we group together. It's a political term. What I need to understand is I need to understand the Korean culture, the Japanese culture, Filipino culture. That is more important to me. That is not about just about the artwork. It's about, you know, how I've been labeled as an Asian American, how much I understand the other Asian culture. That's important to me. And maybe perhaps that's why in the 80s, we started Tuesday Lunch Club. It's a whole bunch of artists. To start with was me and Ijin Khan, Korean American artist. And we sit down and find a restaurant in Chinatown. We get together and we eat and we chat. And not just about art, it's about our life. It's about our daily life. And I think that's more important to me than just go to a country or go to a museum to look at the artwork. And that's what I try to say about that. That's why right now I learn a lot from young artists in Shanghai. And American culture influenced them, and without going out from Shanghai. And I have a party, and they can grab a guitar and grab a drum and sing like hip hop. That totally surprised me. You know, how American culture can extend that far and to influence the younger generation. They don't even have any experience in the United States. So that's what my experience right now in Shanghai.
And that's good, and that is good and bad, Bingley.
I know. It's not about good, but it's about the fact. It's not a fake news.
What I like about
It's a fact.
I like the fact that you said, a bit like Hong Tu in his video, if I'm going to talk about art, I'm going to talk about life. And now let me move the arrow for Yin Mei.
Okay.
Pick up on the same question Anthony had for
Yeah,
Hong Tu.
I want to add something to what just was said. I think what you say about Asia art is very parallel to Europe. I mean, there's giant differences between England, France, Germany, Italy. We have 1,000 years of wars to prove it. You know, nonetheless, there is a European culture, and the art does come out of those cultures. English art does come out of English culture and so forth. And it's very interesting to look at all that. And there is a specific European feeling, but there are enormous differences between these countries. We've had 2 recent world wars to prove that.
And very xenophobic attitudes within Europe as well as here. So
I would love to hear from Young Mei on this subject also.
Please, Yin Mei.
Okay, good. Thank you. To me, I think that I can speak from my time. I was growing up during Chinese Cultural Revolution. So when I was in 1st grade, the revolution started. So from there, you don't learn much at all. You go to the Chairman Mao said, stop school, let's make a revolution. So then our teacher was never really much a teacher. It's the workers and mostly workers. And later on, when we went to a little bit higher grade in elementary school, that sometimes the military people were coming in. So our class was all organized in a way that we're not really studying in the way that are giving us an education, but our time, we spend 1/3 our time to go to the country. 1/3 of the time we go to the factory to learn from the workers and the peasants. And 1/3 of the time we walking, going into the, actually going into the big stadium to watching condemning people, to watching people being executed. So that is my time growing up. So my world is the revolution. And that, for me, that is the world. And the world is up and downs, and you see my parents are intellect. So they're living in an institute. So their entire institute, we're living in a compound. We're living there, my parents working there. The school was inside, little markets are all inside, basically little clinics also inside. You can living in there by your life, but they are fighting, they are doing all these horrible things, people being killed and all of that. So I actually don't know about any tradition. I starting to really know Confucianism or Confucian was in the time in the late 70s that we called it a Pilin Pikong. So when Lin Biao died, so there is a big movement that everybody to condemning Lin Biao, Chairman Mao's comrades, and saying that he's trying to kill Chairman Mao. And at the time, I am already being at 14, I'm becoming a professional dancer. So joined this big state company. And before that, I was in the army. I trying to be the Liberation Army and to dance Chairman Mao's ideology and also Jiang Qing's revolutionary ballet. We called it a model ballet. So my entire years, 7 years in the dance company was dancing. There's 2 ballet, the red, the white-haired girl and the red detachment of women. So well, so what was in my the foundation of my becoming, I wanting to be the warrior to protecting Chairman Mao. I'm the artistic warrior. So this is we were all educated that way. We want to give up our own life to believing in this something that is much greater, and this communist, which we absolutely believing in it. And right now we have the coronavirus, so I am revisiting that idea myself as well, because we can talk about this later. But what I'm trying to say is, during the revolution, when the revolution finished, I have a chance to go to Hong Kong. So in like when I was like 22, I becoming the principal dancer with Hong Kong Dance Company. So from Hong Kong, it was like the window for me to see the Western world. And I wanted to come to New York because I wanted to dance, because dance is the best thing ever happened to me in my life. Because those chaos, when a child growing up, your parents being sent away, you see people being humiliated and fighting and all of that, and you have no school, you come back to school, you were just doing ridiculous things. So there's many stories when I starting to telling people a little bit here and there, and people could not conceive it. They don't understand what's going on. Yeah, they really do not understand. And to me, I just know this is my world. I accept it, and every Chinese is trying to maneuver their way. Sometimes you can't, because your life is not your life. And but because I was young, I be able to observe. But then coming to this country to study Western civilization, Western culture, in the 80s, I went to NYU. So then I started to looking back to my own tradition. And for all those 30 years, I never stopped studying Chinese culture, because I am totally falling in love with it, because I think that civilization is such a treasure, can giving any human being this courage and this wisdom, this insight to go by their life. But I really do felt what was the tradition and what was the contemporary China, it was disconnected. And that even though this incredible culture is right there, it's my work, from my creative dance work and to later on my visual work, it was always my memory from Cultural Revolution, because I just cannot escape it. Every images that I saw is so vivid. So 30 years of my creative work, no matter what kind, is relating to my memory. And of course, the memory is not only about memory, because I don't want to talk about the Cultural Revolution, not at all. I don't want to revisiting it, but some image with my own glow as a person in this country, and I be able to connecting them deep inside. So I think for that part, New York is always a very exciting place for me. 1980s, I came to this country. I'm being connected with all those Chinese artists, as Hong Tu and Xu Bing and Yan Li. When at the time we were hanging out in Washington Square with Ai Weiwei, with Chen Danqing, with Li Quanwu, with Tan Dun, when Chen Kaige, they are all here. We were all hanging out together. So I think, of course, to me, is this Western idea had given me. I just feel like I'm open my arm for the first time, open my arm, and to feel that people were not forced to do things which you do not even know it's the right thing to do. You don't have to think, you just do it. And people just insane, just like you do not have to think, just jumping into it and hurting people, hurting themselves, and has a very bad consequences afterwards. And but to me, I think that what I'm really saying is that I really wanted to see, this is something is much bigger subject to discuss. You know, I'm just giving a few minutes of talk, just saying that I wish the Chinese current situation and the leaders and artists, including artists themselves, ourselves, our generation and younger generations, they are running away what is the most precious civilization that was out there. And but communist, I mean capitalist, really brainwashed our mind as well, because I felt like people like me or my generation that goes through cultural revolution, there is something that the self-reflection and the bottom line, it was rooted, is grounded. And when I come into this country, there's one side of me, it is this incredible openness, the incredible idea that is emphasizing individual, you get respect. But then after so many years, and I realized there's a lot of things I think is from the politics, the economics, for arts, everything was manipulating. There's always things behind. And I, now with this coronavirus, and I just feel like I saw people go online to receive some food, and I was just, my eye was wet, and I felt like, we are human. You just give us a little bit, maybe $500, $400 a month, you have your food. Everybody have their food. And then you have one room that is belong to your room. You can go back, and then that is making you having a decent, respected, and you respect yourself. And then you have education. You can go online, you can do self-education, you can, all the way. But then after you, maybe the last thing is the health system. If a great country can really giving every human being this very simple thing, and then we can all living with dignity. We don't have to fight for things which is actually is not belong to them, because this world is not us. It's not belong to some people or 10% of Americans, that the rich Americans. They hold all the resources. And I think they should take the source. It belongs to everybody. And I think China now, the communist part was gone. The good communist part is gone. And the bad capitalist is overwhelmingly in China. And people, all the ideology.
If I may, we have limited time. And I love this part of your conversation, but it's going to get someone else. Okay. I'll go back to this point of variety, singularity, etc. I would like to pass the microphone to Muna and Anthony and Elizabeth. And please speak about this differential that your brother brought about to New York City, because Exodus is also about what this group of Chinese artists, multi-generational, added to New York. I'm an immigrant like Anthony, and we love the fact that we, like in the 1920s, Gertrude Stein said, the best art is being made in Paris by Spaniards. New York has always prospered because of our ability to bring more foreigners like ourselves, and we're the true New Yorkers. Yeah. So I like Muna, your brother contributed enormously to the pop generation in New York. Is a different story altogether, which is a counterpoint. Would you please speak of this subject? And Elizabeth, Anthony, engage yourselves with Muna.
Well, it's so interesting listening to everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Because I think my family, my older brother Sang Kwang Chi, and I came to New York in the late 70s. And our experience is quite different from Ying Mei, Hong Tu's. Maybe I share something with Bing and Bob Lee because we came from Hong Kong. My parents were refugees from Mao in 1949, and they settled in Hong Kong. So the three children, Guangji is the oldest, myself in the middle, and a younger brother, Raymond. We were born in Hong Kong, and because of the Cultural Revolution reverberating over the border, the whole family decided to immigrate to Vancouver, Canada first. And Hong Tu was speaking about, I love what he said about the cage opening and the birds just fly out and they just go towards the sky. They don't think. And I think that was the feeling I had, and I think Kwang Chi did when we arrived in New York, which was our own choice to come here to be artists in the late 70s. 77, 78, we came here and we began to become young artists in this city at a time when New York was just really in dire straits. It was broke. It was full of terrible law and order issues, drug issues, and we descended into downtown New York, East Village. But we felt like warriors in that broken city because we had the spirit to be here. And we felt like those birds that were let out into the sky. I think partly because of the trauma of being immigrants from Hong Kong to Vancouver, Canada, in our adolescence was not a pleasant situation. So in a sense, we are generations of immigrants, not refugees as such, because I feel that Kwang Chi and I chose to be here to not as an escape, but as a choice. In the 1980s, 79, 80, he began to be adopted into this East Village atmosphere and scene. And at that time, we really did not know other Chinese artists. We didn't connect with other Chinese artists. We speak Cantonese and not Mandarin. And I think a lot of the mainland artists that came did not speak English, and we didn't really interact with them because of the language barrier. My early experience was I came to dance with Jean Erdman at Theater of the Open Eye. She was from Martha Graham. And so immediately kind of we slid into an American way of working, of learning. Huang Qi had gone to Paris to take art school before coming to New York. And so our perspective was of making art without boundaries, without identifying necessarily as Asian Americans, even though I remember very early on that I overlapped with Bob Lee's wife, Eleanor Jung, who was a choreographer. And I learned some of her choreography and taught at Asian American Arts Center. But I was mainly performing with Gene Erdman, and then I started my own dance company and performed in New York under my company, Muna Sang Dance Projects. Huang Qi and I thrived in this sort of very threadbare existence in New York, but we had incredible spirit. I think it was just kind of a survival, but also a thrive of following our bliss, as Joseph Campbell would say. And my brother's life was cut short. He died in 1990 at age 39. And I think his adopting to make his art wearing a Mao Zedong suit is perhaps a way of connecting to our parents, even though it upset our parents because they were running away from the communists in 49. And so to have their son adopt this persona and photograph himself in that suit all over the world was an affront to them.
All right, in 2 minutes.
They didn't really understand that Huang Qi saw the power in the symbol of a Chinese official in the world. And so it's a complex thing, the identity issue. And for myself, it wasn't until some years later in the 90s that I connected with Chinese artists like Tan Dun, the composer, and we worked together, collaborated in making a piece which premiered in Hong Kong in 1994, I believe, with City Contemporary Dance Theater. And it was the first time, dance company, CCDC. It was the first time that I went back to Hong Kong to work. And I realized that it was my chance to get to know my culture, which I only knew as a child. I left when I was 13 years old. And it was a chance to make research into Chinese literature, work with dancers who were trained in Chinese dance, classical dance, as well as contemporary vocabulary. And also in the 90s, I went back to China for the first time. 1989 was the first time I accompanied my parents back to China. It was 40 years since they left. In 1949, my mother saw her sister for the first time after 40-year hiatus. It was very emotional. And I came back and I made a piece called Post-Revolutionary Girl. For me, it was not a direct experience, but it imprinted very strongly on me. And then in the early 90s, I went back with Bing Li and some other New York artists to a trip on the Silk Route to Dunhuang, to the caves. And I think I felt like it was the first direct experience to touch the civilization that we come from. It was very profound. And it was a wonderful trip because I got to meet other Chinese artists like Nina Kuo and Bing and Arlen Wong, and Sabrina Fung was organized the group. And and it was a chance to see how we all took that trip so differently and were interested. We were fighting for to collect certain artifacts from Dunhuang. And it was interesting to see what each of us was interested in. And so I'm kind of coming full circle to the fact that Huang Qi did not have a chance to go back to China. He did not go back to Hong Kong. So in a way, he has the strongest persona wearing the Chinese suit, but in fact, he never set foot in China.
I have a question for Muna. Juan?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Muna, you know, despite the Mao suit and all that, your brother had the most remarkable capacity for reaching out into this culture, and not just meeting the social Illuminati, but having himself photographed with an astronaut at Cape Canaveral. You know, he really, most artists have a few very strong ideas. He seemed to reach out in every direction possible, a very unusual gift.
He had a huge appetite for life, and that and a huge personality to go with it. So he, through his friends and his social circle in the East Village, which were mostly, they were kids from School of Visual Arts. Kenny Scharf, Keith Haring, and Bruno Schmidt and Samantha McEwen. They formed kind of a gang, you know, a very talented, enthusiastic gang in East Village, and they made a scene for themselves. Club 57 was on St. Mark's Place, and it became their playground. So Anne Magnuson would do performances and evenings there with exhibitions and whatnot, which attracted Jean-Michel Basquiat and Fat Five Freddy and the uptown or the more successful artists would come, and he was involved with the Mud Club and Paradise Garage. He had a very deep friendship with Keith Haring, and they actually had a parallel trajectory because they both died in 1990. Keith was 7 years younger. And he started photographing Keith in while he was a student at School of Visual Arts in 1979. And he photographed him for 10 years over the entire arc of Keith's career. And Keith made him his personal photographer in the early 80s when he started to become an art star and started earning money. But money was never an issue in those days for any of us, really. I don't know how we survived, but we somehow survived. And so I think you're speaking about his ability to meet people and cajole them into posing with him or helping him with his projects was a gift. And it enabled him to just kind of, again, I come back to that beautiful image of the birds flying. You know, we just flew wherever we wanted to fly and we didn't think about it. And we land where it happened to land us. And so it was an incredible journey.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I have a question for any artist who feels they want to answer it. This has been a journey of discovery for me. And one thing I've learned to some extent is that China is really quite a religious culture, and religion can take many forms. Now, the West maybe also, but most people are startled to hear that Mondrian and Kandinsky were theosophists, for instance. That was kept under the table. It's not something that came up in artistic discussions. Both Ming Fei and John Soy volunteered to me how important Taoism was to them. We have Taoism, Confucianism, I guess even Maoism in a way. This clearly is important amongst some artists in China. I would like to hear anybody who has anything to contribute to that, or maybe disagree with me. Aha.
Anthony, may I say something?
Yes.
Before probably Bingley would like to answer that one. I can see
Yes.
his face. But also, what is very interesting, I spoke to Arthur Danto before, as I was opening White Box, and he celebrated that for the first time in history of art, of mankind, we had reached the moment with no isms, and that was achieved in the 1980s after minimalism, conceptualism, etc. And the Exodus 1980s, I selected this moment for Exodus 2, is a moment when all these different Chinese artists of different ages and conditions and situations come into the moment downtown, his village, Soho, where the isms don't exist anymore. You can make art about anything, and you can find a gallery, you can find an outlet, right, in his village, anywhere. So just to your question, for everybody,
well,
I'd like
Jeffrey,
to add that you were all acting in the moment of the end of isms.
I would only add that Jeffrey Deitch says a new ism is moneyism.
In America has always been.
Yes. Yes, Bing, I'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Talking about religious, I don't have any, even though I went to Catholic school and I studied Bible and all that, but I don't take it as a religious. And also my uncle practiced Taoism. So when I was in high school, he forced me to read the Dou De Jing, the Tao. It's not the I Ching, and the Dou De Jing, and every summer. And then when I was younger, they say, okay, sum up the book with one sentence. And then when I get older, they say, sum up that book in one word. And so I sum up that word, adjust. Adjustment is the word. So a lot of people say Dou De Jing is change. So change is the big picture as an individual that you have to adjust. So that's when I got to New York, I remember that word, adjust. And then now I have a studio in Shanghai, and that word is readjust. So how to do that? That's perhaps that is the religious for me, because I remember my uncle teach me about all of that. So that's what I can say about religious. And
yeah, could we have Anissa, since you're going to be in the part 2, could you contribute to that, answering that question or comment by Anthony?
No, it's still down.
For myself personally, I don't have a religious. Yes, I born and brought up in Hong Kong. And I think in Hong Kong, there's like a multiple, many religions, we have Catholic, Christians. And for the public holiday, when you look at the Hong Kong calendar for the public holiday, we have Easter holiday, we have Christmas holiday, and now after handover, we have a Buddhist day, something for the Buddhist religious. I think for me personally, I don't have religious, but I think religious to me is more like a philosophy. And I did I think I did influence by some of those theories in Taoism. I think that is closer to life. So I think even though you're not really religious, or I don't really go to church or temple or read the Tao Te Ching, I think I never read that, but I think I read a cartoon that is drawn by a Taiwanese artist about Zen. And I think that has quite some influence on me for daily life and my art. I think the Jen or pretty close to Taoism is more like life and how you see it. You know, things like that. And being said a judge, I'm thinking about that work. Well, I probably need more time because for the Jen that I know, it's kind of like things happens. It depends on how you look at it. Or do you need to adjust yourself to that? Or I am not sure, but I think it's the point of view. It's very important. Okay, let's say one very short Jen story. It's like a man saw a woman working in the field under the sun. Is working really hard, sweating, and then the young people ask the old man, okay, why you're working so hard? You're already very old. And then he said, because I am here. And then he said, even though you work, you don't need to work under the sun. It's so hot. And then the old man said, because the sun is here. And I think that gives me the feelings that actually, I think that kind of teaching helped me to live in different places, you know, in Hong Kong or in New York, because I am here. So what happened like right now, we have the COVID-19, we need to stay home. And then I think, oh, it's a good time to pause to look at what's happened before, what's going on, and, you know, what's my art going to do, you know, probably after we come back the virus, we got to face the financial situations because maybe not people we're going to buy art very soon. So what I'm going to next step, you know, I think whatever happens is a time to think, to react, or to adjust to it, because I am here, the virus is here, and now we are here.
Well, that's very nice. And I would like, Elizabeth, do you think, and Anthony, in part 2, you will be inviting people in the exhibition to comment under this moment of transition from virus to virus? Because next year we'll have a second comment of the virus.
Well, my hope fundamentally is this. Since this last year and a half has been a large process where we will only sort of start to unlocking to work with a lot of you. And I'm hoping that the latter part, presuming we get the grants, that it will allow more dialogue about these periods of time and more expression. In a way, I wish we had started these dialogues with all of you a year and a half ago. But perhaps as I envision, this project has started to unlock. So I'm hoping you all be involved. Hopefully we get the grants. Hopefully we move along. And taking a longer vision, and yes, bringing in all these other things. And I don't mean to not, oh shoot, I hope that's not Yen Lee now calling me. Oh, John, you're online. Why are you calling me again? Okay, so John, forgive me, I kept disappearing, but I was on the phone with John Soy, and he has now joined us because he wasn't getting his laptop. So Anthony, John's here, and I don't know
maybe Anthony can ask the same question about Taoism to John.
Okay.
Anthony?
Hi, John. I was just speaking about, I just mentioned that you and Ming Fei both told me that the importance of Taoism in their work. Now, many Western artists have religious faiths, but they very seldom bring them to the surface. It's not something that comes much into the discussion. I like the fact that you're very open with your beliefs and how much they infuse your performance work.
Anthony, John was just calling. We've been on the phone for the last hour. He's having a problem with the sound. It took the last hour to get him properly.
Yeah, he cannot find the controls to take mute out.
John? Oh, hi. Okay, again, as I told you before, upper right corner where I got you to click on to put your image. You have to put on mute. Okay, I'll leave you all alone for a minute. And about Taoism, we can talk in Zhuang. So that, all right.
What? Okay, I have another observation for all the artists here. Walking to Exodus 2 for the first time and going around, I felt an acute sense of difference from what I was likely to see in any parallel show of Western artists.
Right corner.
Several differences. One of them is that you see how much Western art comes out of Cézanne and the Impressionists. It's about paint. It's about applied paintwork. And you can often see, you know, physical evidence of painting. Now, all you guys are very good painters. I love Hong Chu's painting, but it is, to me, very much work based on line, based on drawing, based on graphics. You know, Bing Li is wonderful work and totally based on that, I think. I would like anyone who feels that, are you drawing on a specific tradition in this?
Something on the sound right above where you put the image on.
Elizabeth, move to the other room.
On mute. So remove mute. And then you
Please, can you comment? Bing?
I'm going to put you on my phone to talk.
Bing?
Yeah.
Try right now.
Line, drawing.
Drawing. Yes, I'm a drawer.
Have you tried?
So,
Wait. I can mute her.
so
I just mute her.
when I first start art in Hong Kong, and my first training is my part-time job during high school, and to get my allowance is to work on a comic book, Chinese comic book. So the artist just have a pencil drawings. I have to use a pen to follow the pencil drawing to make a line drawing for painting. That's my first training. Maybe that influenced me for use line to draw. And also, I grew up with all those comic books. Comic books is basically, the form is from using the line. It's not paint. They just fill in the color with the outline of the form. That's maybe perhaps that influenced me a lot. And another thing that why I keep doing that and use line drawing as my visual language is when I first moved to New York, I have a very small studio. I love to paint a bigger painting, but I start with a very small studio. So I use drawing as a media. And even though later I put it up some cutout poster in the street, it's still a line drawing. And right now, is the line is the major line drawing is I use line to depict the form.
I can see that
it's not the paint to depict the form. So that's I've been working on that, and that's how where I'm from, and that's why I go.
When I look at, it's not your work is wonderful work, and I love the light. But when I think of Chinese art generally and Japanese art, Japanese harushiga, hokusai, I think of line, the carvings, everything. The line is what struck me most forcibly in basically Asian art generally, including the sculpture. In a way, it's very linear compared to a lot of Western sculpture. I'd like any comment on that. I don't. Maybe I'm wrong.
Can I say something?
Yeah, Hong too. Yes.
Okay. I don't think I'm correct, but that's my feeling from my life in both China and here. In China, compared with the Western country, China is more like flat. Body, even the landscape, compared with the Western, like American nature, American people, the Western people's body is flat. So when I saw the Chinese, not only the painting, people really think the line work is so important. People worship line. People said that's without the brush line, there's no Chinese art. But in the Western, there's so many drawing, but drawing with a 3D feeling and a lot of sculpture from Egypt to Greek until today. So after I think around 10 years living in New York, back to China, I saw everything so flat. It is flat in the sense of the visual sense. It's easier to describe, easier to paint, to draw with a line. You saw people's drawings with a beautiful line. It's more like how to say the Greek sculpture, also with a line. We call it a gun, it's the gun. But not only the drawings, also for the daily life, line work become very, very important rule. So nobody really concerned about how to use the light and the shade. You use the real 3D visual impact to make artwork. There was a missionary artist went to China, I think maybe 300 years ago. His painting is with more like a kind of like a photorealism. It is a realism, but with a shadow, with a light, with a very 3D, but looks really like the real person. And somebody like it, but the emperor said, no, it's ugly. For example, if you painted the north with a shadow on one side, the emperor will tell him, no, my face is clear. It's a white face. It's a beautiful, flat, only one color. It's not so many colors. So in this case, people really don't care about color, 3D feeling. People continue worship line. So that's I don't know if
Yeah,
answer or not.
Thank you, Hong Tae.
May I throw a comment?
No, of course you can.
Oh no, yes.
All right. In college, I study art from China and Japan in particular, and calligraphy and so forth. And I come from, in Spain, I studied Romanesque. And there is a moment in European painting or history of art where we flatten the space, which is 11th, 12th century, 10 to the 12th. And I'm working on a show about flattening space. But in my looking into the roots of the line in Chinese, Japanese culture, and Korean now, is that your way of writing, right? Your hieroglyphs, your pictographs, right? Bing, you stay there. It's very linear. And you begin to understand the world from behind or in front of a line as you make pictographs. And that to me has carried to the DNA of understanding how things move around. And it's very fascinating. I will continue, and one day I will do this show called Flattening Space, right? Well, in the West, we have been mesmerized with deep space, depth of space constantly, right? Theatrical space and so forth. Yeah? I don't know, just a little comment that it gives me involved in that way of treating space. And as Anthony says, you have more of a linear line involved, which Muna and Yin Mei in dance, which I'm fascinated by dance. I try to be a dancer, but I train in ballet, but I couldn't spin. I couldn't spot. I got dizzy. I could do everything else but spot. But when I see dance, I see lines constantly, right? It's like sound. Everything is a line that moves and goes back and forth. So if you can, Yin and Muna, you can comment on the question by Anthony on line in your tradition.
Well, I think in dance, it's line through space, and the dancing body is between space and time. The photography, as my brother took it, is a certain moment that's composed in 2 dimension. Is the end product, the end photograph, but it's very much dealing with perspective and space. So, for example, his Niagara Falls photo, he's huge in front of Niagara Falls, and Niagara Falls is very small in the back. So you sense the 3-dimensionality by his choice of where to place the camera. We should have a dance party one day when this virus thing is all over.
All right,
and we can all make beautiful lines together.
Come to the firehouse.
Exactly.
I have another observation about my reactions to the show. I noticed an enormous absence, a very welcome absence. Juan says the isms are all dead. Well, they are dead, but they're still stalking the Western world. If you go to a group show in the United States, you see 5th-generation monochromes. You see people doing work that would have been enormously radical if it was done 40 years ago. But I don't know. I think it's probably to do with coming with a culture that has no tradition of modernism. Everybody seems to create their own art world, their own tradition. I saw no ghosts of past modernism in this show. I would love comments on that.
Comments? Yeah.
That killed it, stone dead, didn't it?
Can I say one word just because your question actually kind of related to the big issue today. People talk a lot, which is globalization. Somebody said, no, after with coronavirus, sounds like globalization will be gone, no more, because the virus. But actually, to me, from a culture perspective, the globalization steadily will going on. I think this is the only way for people to understand each other, to people to communicate each other. Maybe we should make a adjustment, but steadily we're going on. So people like me, like our generation, like being like all the artists of the similar generation, our background, history background, tradition background is mixed. Nobody only have, I don't think for today's world, anything's pure. No pure European culture, no pure Chinese culture. I mean, in my generation, I don't talk about 100 years ago. So everything's mixed. In this case, I think the big benefit for us is we are more open to the world. The world also open to us. So we have the opportunity to learn everything from our daily life. I'll give you another upside example. When I was young, I was in art school when I was 16 years old. The art history stopped right before Impressionism. After everything happened in the Western world, after the Impressionism, the teacher said, which is Dixon bourgeois art is bad. not allowed people to learn. So that's why now when people like me, my generation, come here, I thought everything's new. Even something already happened 100 years ago, even 200 years ago, to me, it's still new because we, not so many people saw anything original in China. We learned something. So that's why it made me feel just want to open my eye and to try to learn everything every single day. So that's my answer about the art and what happened to art to different generations, people from China or from maybe from Asia country.
I think I was very interested in Asian American art, and it was clear that what was happening was so different from what was in Soho, and so there was no need, and it was even a distraction for me to try to link those things together. There was no need. I needed to try to understand what Asian American artists were doing, and you didn't have to go back to the isms. It wasn't coming out of that tradition. To create the perceptions that diverse people were bringing to the States and to them, and to see everything new, recreate and change what was in the past, to break from the past. They did not need, there was no need for the isms. So I think that's how it felt back in those days, and that continues in many ways. And so there's some danger now that if you try to break down what happened in the 80s or what's happening to looking at Asian contemporary art now, to link them to those isms. It's sort of like second generation graffiti. When we did an exhibition on artists coming, two artists from Japan and two American artists from Japan, and doing the next generation of graffiti. That it was a crazy experience trying to show them. Alexandra Chang curated that show at the Art Center because they seem not to be drawing from any of the issues of art history, but from coming out of a purely commercial media art background. Their kind of graffiti was no longer done on walls or outdoors on trucks, but were being hired by corporations to exhibit in museums and things like that. That was an incredible kind of graffiti to see that coming out of the first generation of graffiti, which was all, of course, urban. So on the other hand, the isms come back, but in a different way.
I think this is why illegality, the kind of vandalism, was such an important issue. It kind of proved legitimacy in a way. In the original graffiti, they were proud of that.
Yes.
They were proud of the fact they got arrested now and again.
Absolutely.
They didn't get sponsorships right away. I think there's some people who've been very silent. We should hear from them.
I wanted to responding to you, Anthony, when you're talking about it, you see this the exhibition, you don't see the ghost, because actually Chinese, when you go back to Chinese tradition, the Chinese is very individual. They respect people.
We'll try to help them.
Very interesting. Yeah.
That what I'm saying, that is that you can look at the history. The Chinese artists themselves, one person. It's not like the communist. Before communist, long before communist, you cannot really understand China. Just say China. China really has at least two completely opposite world. I think that mostly, of course, artists, they wanted to be like Taoism, you called it Taoism. Those philosophy, those ideas influence, giving people this sudden realization, because we as an artist, we realize something. It's not like it's like a scientist, but the scientist in your generation, you don't have to have this sudden realization done by yourself. You can piggyback on other people's discoveries, and the scientific discoveries still can going on. But for art, this is for us that we are being, when we realize, we have the sudden realization that is our art, and that sudden realization is only belong to you. So when I study classic traditional Chinese work and art, everything that was existing has a name. So, but communists take that away, that it is not. You can only worship in one or few important people. So when you say there's almost like no ghost in this painting, and I can see that, because it's all from individual, that what we see, what we do at that moment. And I'm totally fascinated, actually, once I put this letters on, because there are so many letters. So then one just said, give me 80s. But when I looking at 80s, when I come into American, the envelope does not look good. The stamp is very too American. But to me, I like to look at the 70s letters, and which I wrote, and I did not read those letters. So I picked them by how do they appear, have some color, and have interesting stamps. So then I definitely realized that even though those letters, while I was writing them, that is absolutely the time that I putting in with my whole being, writing those things. And then that letters, when it passed, it does not mean anything anymore. So it's just the language that I think Chinese language is so fascinating. And
there's a button you have to, my dear, we're just not getting anywhere here.
Elizabeth, excuse me.
Oh, I apologize. I've been working for the last 1 hour with John Soy. I finally got him to put up his image, but I think he's here. John, can you speak? Okay, can you hear it?
Yeah.
Can you all hear this?
Yes.
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 Well, I can hear you, Elizabeth. I can't hear John.
Oh, shoot.
It's.
Oh, here. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a second. I don't know what to do.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very difficult to connect with John Soy. I'm so sorry. And since we've been here for 1 hour and 25 minutes and the normal limit is 40 minutes, I'm going to ask Elizabeth and Anthony if you have a wrap-up question for everybody, and try to be like in NPR. You have 45 seconds to finish your sentence. Yeah. Elizabeth.
Here.
John, are you there?
Yes, he's right here. Here, John.
Can you talk, John? He doesn't hear us.
Yes,
No.
he does. He's right here.
John?
I think meetings, I like a little bit of anarchy in a meeting.
John, it's working. Speak.
He doesn't hear us. Okay, we must put an end to this conversation. So Elizabeth, Anthony, if you want to wrap it up.
And I only want to say that I've really enjoyed this, and I like the element of anarchy in it too, by the way. It makes it the disruptive element. It's very postmodern. I've enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I've learned a lot. This whole project has been a learning experience, as I said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, we have had to have this show online
Right.
since the third week until the extension, which the show ends tomorrow. So this conversation is going to be available via Facebook. Alejandro is going to let us know how to access it. And it's been watched by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Department of Cultural Affairs officers, because we're applying for a grant for the part 2 of this wonderful project. Exodus 2, I'll remind you, Anthony, 1 second. Exodus 2 was a series I conceptualized, I created in 2016 when Trump was elected president, and I knew he was going to be completely a disaster regarding immigration. So with Exodus 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're pretending at White Box to welcome immigration in the art world, particularly what immigration has done to New York City. Elizabeth?
I just feel sort of sad, you know, after working a year and a half on this. And however, I'm not sad at all, because what has happened as a result is more and more beings that I hadn't even been able, since moving back from India, to be in touch with or meet. So in a weird way, this has brought out some other interesting confluences, and therefore everything is a work in progress. So I'm sorry I have to pack it all up on Friday, but as we have documented everything, and we are looking forward to the other parts, I want more beings to be more involved, and I want you to share, you know, more resources, which I wasn't back long enough to get back into the fold, I guess. But nonetheless, it's been interesting, and everybody's been very collaborative, and I'm very grateful. And it's been wonderful. I've gotten to speak Chinese again all the time, so forgive me, it's very selfish of me. But I hope you're all right, and I hope that we will be working together in the near future. And the subject matter and the concept has a long way to go, but it's very, very valid, and it's ironic, everything that's happened. So thank you all very much. And John,
Anthony?
I'm sorry we couldn't get you to speak today.
Very good. Anthony, would you?
Yes, I've got something very
word?
short. I got very short to say that what I've learned, something I knew already, which is the vital importance of immigration to this country, the importance of cultural immigration. This country is better off that we're all here. Simple as that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bravo,
Thank
bravo.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
With this, we'll bid farewell to you all. Thank you for your collaboration. It's been a pleasure having you all.
Bye, Anissa. Nice to see you, Bingley.
Hello.
Alejandro,
Bye.
Bye,
Okay.
got the Facebook, please.
Okay.
everyone.
All right. Thank you, May. Thank you, Anissa. Thank you, Hong Tu. Thank you, John. Elizabeth, Muna, Bing
Thank
Lee,
you,
Robert
Kat.
Lee, and Anthony Haden-Guest. You've been a pleasure to have
Hi,
with
Anthony.
us at White Box. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Guys, on.
Bye, Muna. Bye, Bingley.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, Sachan.
Okay.
Ciao.
Sachan.